Hey guys, Nick here from Just Few Studios. That's the way you want to start 2020. And we are here with the JFU podcast doing our yearly year in review podcast. So this is kind of when we like to reflect on the year and talk about, and let me get it up so I get the right order of things, the worst games of 2019. The Wishlist Games of 2019, which are the games we didn't get around to play but would want to play. The best games of 2019. And then our anticipated games of 2020. Again, those are the games that are going to come out 2020 that we're just excited to get our hands on based on what we've seen. We may take a little bit of a break at that point, and then we'll get into movies, talking about the worst movies of 2019. That's always a fun category. Then our wish list movies of 2019. Those are the movies we didn't get around to go see. The best movies of 2019. And then our anticipated movies for 2020. Those are the movies that haven't come out yet, but we can't wait to go see when they do. So, a little bit of housekeeping stuff. We got the chat up. So, we tried that for the JFU Film Awards. And I think it worked out nicely. So, we're going to give it a try for this. This is not going to be an always thing whenever we do a live stream or a JFU podcast. We're just kind of testing it out again here. See how it works. And it might not even be up for the entire live stream, but we just want to kind of see how it works. So say if we're talking about a movie or game, and you also want to talk about either that movie or that game, or maybe you have a best movie of the year that you really liked and want to talk about it, you can type it in the chat, and kind of is a more interactive, communal way of having this conversation.
And one thing I will note is that even if we don't directly respond to your chat, we will have seen the chat in some way, and maybe we will dedicate like a small time to answer the chats, but even if we don't answer, we do see your chat. But it sometimes is a little bit inconvenient to try an interactive chat while we're having a discussion among ourselves. But we do see your message. You guys see your message.
And on that note, hello, Sonic the Hedgehog Movie 2020. Welcome to the live stream.
I love that name so much.
Yeah, there's actually a great moment when he popped into the JFU Film Awards.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and everyone's like, the Sonic movie.
But hello, welcome to the live stream. And do you guys have any more housekeeping things to add?
So for best in just the whole game section, I've only played one game. So for the rest of it, I'll be talking about TV shows I've watched, because I've watched a decent amount this year. And
since he's seen a lot of TV shows and we haven't, it just kind of works out.
Yeah.
So just so you're aware, when we're talking about games, if he mentions The Mandalorian or Watchmen or something, there's not a new Mandalorian or Watchmen game. It's a TV show.
That'd be cool though, but that's not the case. So.
But yeah, then I guess without further ado, shall we get into the worst games of 2019?
That's all you.
Alrighty, so so I'm gonna be honest. I felt like this was a pretty good year for gaming. I didn't really have a worst game of the year. I had a game that I was disappointed in, but it's still playable. If I had it, I'd still probably play a good majority of it because it seems fun. Just also seems a little stupid in some areas, but
fair enough.
That game is Ultimate Alliance 3, which was on my anticipated list because it's an Ultimate Alliance game, and there really weren't many games announced when we did that podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
But the main thing that, in my opinion, I don't like about it is that the Ultimate Alliance games, have either of you guys played the first two?
I did like forever ago.
And I probably played like bits and pieces of it, but I never like sat down and dedicated a lot of time to it.
They had a really neat original story that I thought was cool. In the first game, it was essentially Dr. Doom's going all Hitler and like, I'm gonna take over this bitch.
Yeah.
And like to the point where I think he kills Odin and takes the power of Odin to rule Earth. And then the main characters, who you get to choose who the main characters are, have to stop him, essentially, which I thought was a cool idea. And like, I've heard people talking about it, and it's like, you get 4 characters, you can make them the Fantastic Four, and it's the best Fantastic Four game ever. Or you can make them the 4 main Avengers, and it's an amazing Avengers game. It's like, you can kind of...
So does choosing different characters, like, change the story at all? Or is the story...
Not so much the story, it changes in-game dialogue that happens. Like, you'll get some dialogue, and there were cutscenes in that game, but most of it was like, the lower third. This character says blank in subtitles with voiceover.
Okay.
Now your character says blank in subtitle voiceover.
But it's still a cool
but it
concept.
changes what those are depending on the characters. The cutscenes stay the same, I think. Or no, the cutscenes also, I think, change with characters, but the dialogue doesn't. If I'm remembering that correctly. But whereas this game, and Ultimate Alliance 2, let me also mention that quickly, was essentially the sequel to the first one, but also it was their attempt at the Civil War story. And it ended on a damn cool cliffhanger to where earlier in the game, Nick Fury dies. And in the game, there's a whole Civil War thing. I forget who the villain was, but there's a villain who's like, I'll help this character, and really stab them in the back in the end. I don't think it might have been Dr. Doom again, now that I'm remembering it. But it was someone, and I think Nick Fury showed up alive. This was before Winter Soldier came out.
Oh, really?
And was like, sup bitches, I'm still alive, and I think helped defeat the main bad.
Yeah.
But it was apparently, it alluded, the first game alluded at Galactus coming to Earth. And I think the second game alluded to like, oh yeah, he's about to show up on our doorstep and Nick Fury knows about it. He needed to get the gang back together because we're fucked.
Yeah. That's
then guess what Ultimate Alliance 3 did? Totally ignored the first two and did an MCU game. Which is why I'm disappointed in it.
Dang, that's
because it came out the same year Endgame did. So they basically, it was a new original-ish story where all the characters are very, very, very inspired by the MCU. And I'll say, based on the trailers, they're not as inspired as I thought they would be. They do take some creative liberties, but like, it's very MCU based. It was, I believe it's, a Switch only game.
Oh, okay.
And the graphics are very
For what?
cartoonish. Switch exclusive
For the
Nintendo.
Ultimate Alliance 3?
I think so. No, it was on Xbox as well.
Yeah.
That's right. But the graphics look very Switch-esque, and it's very cartoony, whereas Ultimate Alliance 2, for the time, had very good-looking graphics.
Yeah.
It looks like if you play the mobile Marvel games, like the Ultimate Champions.
No,
It's like those kind of
It
characters.
is only Switch, you're right.
Yeah, okay. But, yeah, so it's kind of...
Fair enough, yeah.
For the cliffhangers that 1 and 2 put up, and then they totally ignored it, and were like, oh, the MCU's doing really well, let's just kind of, hey, look, it looks like the MCU. I don't know. I was kind of disappointed that, and I'm saying that as someone who loves the MCU. What I wish Marvel had more guts to do, and they're doing in some areas, but definitely not all, is I wish they used the success of the MCU to promote the greater Marvel comics, to be like, hey, you love these characters, Captain America isn't always Chris Evans. Read these comics and play these video games and get to know the character beyond the actor who's playing them.
Yeah, just that one interpretation.
Whereas this game is like, oh yeah, Iron Man is Robert Downey Jr. essentially. Like, he's not played by Robert Downey Jr., but man, the voice actor, all of his director notes was, hey, could you do it like RDJ would? No, like, more RDJ. More. There you go. Now you got it.
Unlicensed RDJ.
But yeah. Alrighty. Just kind of glancing. And if you're just hopping in here, I'll repeat my kind of housewarming, housekeeping message. If we have the chat up, so that say if we're talking about like the worst games, the best games, the worst movies, or the best movie, you guys can have your input and say like, oh, I thought this was a great game or a great movie that came out in the year. I was like, oh, this was a not so great movie or game that came out this year. The chat might not be up for the entirety of the live stream, but
obviously there's bound to be disagreements, but let's try and keep it. Keep it. If we say something that you don't like, don't get aggressive with us, or else we're gonna have to turn off the chat.
Keep it civil.
Yeah, but anyway, so that was again, it's not the worst game of 2019. It's a very playable game, but as an Ultimate Alliance game. One, I don't think Ultimate Alliance 3 should have been the title. They should have just done a different title and make it a totally different franchise.
One thing I told you before we started the stream was just that I just think that there really wasn't that many bad games of the year, and if there was, they were so bad I didn't hear about them.
Exactly, and I'm in the same boat there.
So it's like, the gaming section is always one of our lighter sections of the podcast, because gaming is just such a... the amount of games that come out in comparison to movies is significantly lower. So it's a lot harder to...
And a big difference is you can go, spend 2 hours of your day, pay $10 to go see a movie, where the game's like, oh yeah, I'll spend $60 and donate 6 to 30 hours of my life to see this to completion. It's a bit different.
It's definitely. So yeah, even if, like, I know for me, on my best games of 2019, there's some games that I haven't actually played myself, but I've watched enough of it to get a feel for it. So
yeah. So anything to talk about worst games or TV shows?
For worst TV shows, there's only like one bad TV show I could remember that I watched this year. It was called, it had like a really pretentious name. It was called Too Old to Die Young, I think was the name of it. It had Miles Teller in it. And
really?
Yeah, essentially it was like kind of just like a neo-noir-esque sort of thriller series that went like absolutely nowhere. I watched 3 episodes before. It's like, I know where this is going.
So it's a satire?
No, probably not, honestly.
Even though that's what they classify as?
Poor Miles Teller. Like, man. Like, he had whiplash that everything since more or less has been like, oof, I
will say, it looks beautiful. Oh, here, the cat. But
Keep
like,
talking.
It looks visually great, but nothing about it was really engaging, and it's something that I could see myself enjoying if it was executed in a different way, like the way that they focus certain elements of the story, because it's literally... So, the guy who directed the entire series was the guy who directed Drive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but he's just been doing this exact same kind of style for like the rest of his career.
Does the whole series have like this kind of look?
Everything looks exactly like that.
Let me guess, without seeing it. The Reffin neon lights. Yep. Okay. Yep. Called it.
Pretty much.
Great.
It's a bunch of neon lights, kind of just overexposed, gratuitous violence at times. Like, it's...
So he really took Drive and is running with it.
He's just making Drive again. He's just making Drive, but it's like, how can I make this with even less dialogue?
Man, and I'm gonna be honest. I like Reffin, but I absolutely get what you're saying about like, oof, it's not. It doesn't apply to everything, every movie.
He's an aesthetic more than something you'd actually want to watch.
That's very fair.
But yeah, like, there's just a lot of scenes of things happen. None of it really is like coherent, which I'm not like totally against, because there's been other TV shows that have been able to do that well. But this one is very much nothing. It's a very pretty nothing is the best way to describe it.
Oh, man. Because if you had told me a couple years ago about, like, oh, man, there's going to be a show with Miles Teller made by Reffin, I'd be like, sign me up. And as you're describing it, I'm like, oh, poor kid. Who's like, oh, man.
Well, it just happens. I think that's really the only bad TV show I've watched this year. There's one that's more like a mixed bag, which was Love, Death, and Robots, which is like kind of a series on Netflix that was a bunch of kind of vignettes, animated vignettes that were more like adult animation. Some of them were very good, some of them were not very good at all, so it's like...
Which, to me, based on what you've described, seems like that kind of style/genre. It very much so has the potential to be that kind of mixed bag.
Yeah, it's essentially like, you know those like old Nicktoon shows that are a bunch of like shorts? It's like that, but... for adults and super violent and crazy and has sex everywhere. So, if that sounds cool to you, I'd recommend it. Yes.
Yes. Alright. So, next, I'll be right back.
We are gonna move into Wishlist.
Wishlist. So, Dylan, can you start off that?
Yeah, so... I think one game that I really wish I would have had the chance to play after seeing some footage from it would be... With my wish list, I'm just not going to put an order on it, because there really isn't an order. But one game for sure is Control.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing some good stuff.
I didn't really hear about it until the Game Awards. I feel like it kind of slipped under the radar a little bit, but once I saw the footage from the Game Awards and I looked into it a little bit more, that game looks really good. Really
I still haven't really looked into it, to be honest, but I've heard fantastic things
about
it.
I mean, it has some really cool concepts that I don't think we've seen in a while in a game, so, I mean, that's why it's on my wishlist game. I wish I would have the chance to see it and play it.
Okay. Yeah, and for my wish list, I only really have 3 games. A lot of the gaming things are like more top 3, whereas movies we get into top 5 and then some.
Yeah, but maybe top 10.
Yeah, but my number 3 wish list is Pokemon Sword and Shield. Because I'm not a big Pokemon fan. Or I like the concepts, but I never, as a child, was like getting into it. So I'm a bit behind on that front. But it seems like a good jumping off point. They kind of designed it in a way for people who got a Switch as their first console.
Yeah, they designed it so. Well, we have the people who are diehard Pokemon fans that will appease to, and then we'll be able to also introduce a new audience, hopefully.
Right.
And then if the new audience enjoys it, then they'll go back and buy all the rest of our games.
Exactly, which I'm in that kind of new audience camp, which is ironic because most of my friends are the diehard camp. So
very much. Yeah,
it's one of those games to where if I had a Switch, I'd probably like to play it because I feel like it would be a good way for me to kind of be like, oh, so this is the Pokemans, okay.
I will say overall, like, I can see where you're coming from, but overall the idea of it was like exciting to me because it was one, a new story that we hadn't seen before. Because with Pikachu and Eevee, it was just a remaster, and so it's a new story. It's like fully open world, and it's like 3D, which is something that we haven't really seen that well done before. But ultimately, the graphics on it were kind of underwhelming to me.
Which again, I'm still in that new camp, so I don't have much in terms of expectations for that.
That's fair. But like, there's one thing where like there's a Pokemon rotating. There's like giant Pokemon that are rotating, and like you see their feet moving, and all you see is their character model just rotate like this. Their feet are like moving like they're walking forward, and it's just like literally rotating.
Whereas I'd see that and be like, well, that's a weird quirk for that Pokemon. Like,
you're like, wait, why are all of them doing this? That's kind of weird.
It's just a thing they do.
I guess that's how it's done.
That's how you Pokemon.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from for sure.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any wishlist TV shows?
Or I mean, if you have any wishlist games, maybe.
I actually do have some wishlist games, mainly because I haven't played
it.
only one.
Okay.
But I guess for one would probably be Death Stranding. Just for the sake of like, I've seen a lot of footage on it, but like, I feel like there'd be much more to it if you actually could play it, because there's definitely a lot of story and cutscene, but there's still a game at play there, so I kind of would have been interested to play it at some point. It's just, don't have a PS4.
Yeah.
So, going off of that, I think it's kind of interesting because for me, it's on my wishlist games of 2019, but at the same time, I wouldn't play it.
Fair enough.
Which is kind of ironic because wishlist games are supposed to be games that you wish you could have played.
It's like, I wish I could have played it and had the patience and the abundance of time.
Well, and also just not want to play it at the same time. Like, overall, it's more something that I would rather watch, I think, than sit down and play myself.
Fair enough.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think I gave my opinion fairly well in the last podcast, but just to kind of reiterate, like, I don't got that kind of time, and like some of the concepts are interesting, but to me, I don't think it's interesting enough for the 30 plus hours,
something like that. Yeah,
just to get into the good.
Yeah, because like I've heard people talk about it who say things like, "Oh yeah, it doesn't really get good till you're 15 hours in." And to me, I'm like, I can't finish games that are 6 hours. Like,
yeah, it's like
the fuck you're talking about.
That's not a very good time investment from the way that you're phrasing it like that. It's like,
yeah,
yikes.
And like at its core kind of gameplay of traversing land, carrying the boxes and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, to me, that sounds like something I would play if it were like an indie game for $20. Like if it's literally just a UPS simulator. I see that as like, oh yeah, I could totally play that and just have, a podcast that I'm listening to while I'm just kind of moving boxes.
Yeah.
I love House Flipper for that very reason.
Exactly, yeah.
But for that many hours and the story and the lore and all that kind of stuff to where it's like I need to be paying attention to this,
it's a bit more,
that would drive me mad.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a bit more of kind of a patience tester.
Like if House Flipper had like an apocalypse storyline that was crazy long with CG animation and cutscenes.
And like things that probably won't ever make sense.
I would probably find one level and just keep replaying that level. and not move on.
Fair enough.
Like,
that's understandable.
I totally get what you're saying. For me, it's not even... It's one game that I've heard a lot of praise for that is nowhere on my list as a wish list, a best, a worst. Because for me, it's like, I admire the craft that went into it.
I'm pretty sure it took them 3 years to make it, too.
Yeah, but it's like one of those things to where I could never imagine myself playing it. Like, even if I had no day job, nothing to do, I don't think I have the mental patience to take that on.
That's understandable, yeah. I'd say probably, yeah.
Which, again, nothing but respect to people who play it and like it. I totally get that. I'm saying, for me, there's no way I could sit down and play the game.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Dylan, what's next on your wish list?
One of the other games on my wish list is Star Wars,
Fallen Order.
Yeah. Which, I mean, ultimately, I think, had I played it, it might have made my best games of 2019, but who knows? I mean, I've heard just nothing but good things about it.
Yeah.
That's all I can really say.
I'll talk about it in another category.
Same here.
But, I have some things to say about it. But, next on my wish list is kind of in the same vein as Pokemon. It's one of those games that there's a whole fan base behind it that I'm not a part of. And I think this game could have been a way to get me to be part of that fan base. I just don't have the time and the equipment and all that kind of stuff. Is Borderlands 3.
Yeah.
Because it's a game that Borderlands fans have been waiting for a long time.
And they didn't disappoint.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, I could see myself playing that game as a way to, like, let me see what this Borderlands thing is all about. Because I've been kind of watching from afar during this whole thing of the past 2 games, and even the Telltale one, of like, man, this aesthetic's cool, the world's interesting. I just haven't actually ever played one of those games to know if I'd like it or not.
That's fair.
So I see that as, like, had I played it, a potential way for me to get into that type of franchise.
That's fair, for sure.
I could definitely, agree with that. It's... I've seen bits and pieces of the game, and I've never really played it myself, but it's something like, I don't know. Maybe starting off with the first one would probably be the best idea. I'm not entirely sure, though. But
it doesn't really affect. You can start at 3.
Okay, cool.
I mean, playing the first 2 were good too.
Yeah.
So.
And I've heard great things about them, and I've seen bits and pieces of the first 2.
But you don't have to.
Yeah.
Especially since I don't remember exactly how it works, but there's kind of like a co-op type of thing.
But yeah, so you can play it solo or you can play co-op, and the coolest thing with the co-op is that if you're playing with your friend and let's say you're level 40 something and your friend's level 10, you're gonna be fighting stuff that's on par with your level, and your friend's gonna be fighting stuff on par with their level at the same time. So you could have 2 different, you could have a horde of stuff coming at you, and the horde could split in half and start coming at each half of you, and they're gonna end up turning into different levels. So you fight stuff that's only in correspondence with your
Which
level.
is a cool idea.
Rather than if your friend's really low and you're playing with a high level guy, rather than you getting screwed because you're fighting high level stuff, it balances it out so it's a fun experience no matter what.
Yeah. Which I see that another reason I'd probably want to start with 3 is if I knew anyone who's playing it, I think playing that co-op could be a really fun experience.
Exactly.
Especially if you guys did like the whole game co-op. Like, I just see that as a cool experience and a cool way to get in the franchise. So that's why that game is on my wish list. So, Luke, that was the only thing you wanted to mention? Or anything else?
Untitled Goose Game.
Okay, that's fair. I'm glad that we're talking about that.
I just want to play it. It looks funny.
It's a meme.
That's a game that if we still had all of us here in town with the free time to do our weekly live streams, we would have 100% had you, Marco, Raphael sit down and play Untitled Goose Game.
I think that would have been just a fun time to do.
Yeah, because that is it's my type of game for the live streams and things like that.
Exactly. It's also like Dylan kind of mentioned. It's almost like a well-oiled meme, basically.
Yeah,
a very well-constructed one.
It's one of those games that there's no way it would end up on my worst list because it's just so damn fun in a weird way.
Yeah,
like,
strange way.
You're a goose who's fucking up people's day.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
You are the causer of chaos.
Like, it's great. So, yeah, I'm glad we're talking about it here.
Yeah.
I would have been disappointed if it just, like,
went under the radar.
went under the radar on this channel.
Well, too bad, because now we've talked about it very briefly.
Alright, Dylan, what do you got next?
One of the games that is kind of a more under the table game that I wish I would have gotten a chance to play is Jump King.
I haven't heard about that.
Jump King. What's that?
So it's literally just like, think of getting over it,
Okay.
but instead of like you having to use whatever you're using to climb up
pickaxe
the pickaxe thing, instead you're jumping.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about now. Yes. Okay.
And if you make like one wrong jump, then you can fall all the way back down to like a starting point, and you have to redo it all over again.
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces of that game, and the getting over it map is crazy and big. That map is also insane, cruel, and it's kind of multiplayer.
Well, and so I'm pretty sure in the game alone, you can move left and right before you jump. But then there's a DLC where you can't move left and right, and you can only jump.
That's such a bitch. Oh my god.
It's literally so great. It's definitely a rage game. There's no way I would ever finish it, but to play it till I rage, it would be kind of funny.
Yeah, at least just like once, just for the sake of it.
Yeah. Oh man, I totally forgot about that game. I'm gonna be honest. Alright, so the next, and actually last game on my wish list, is a game that I had seen this year. So many people let's play and all that kind of stuff. And having not played it though, it was one of those games that it got me into a franchise. And it's a game that, I guess I'll just say, and then I'll get into this note. The game is Resident Evil 2, the remake.
I was actually just going to talk about that right afterwards.
Because, like, Resident Evil 7, I think, was my first Resident Evil game that I had seen people play from start to end. And prior to that, I kind of knew them as their big mistake of going from survival horror to action shooter.
Yeah.
And that action shooter stage, I was like, it's not my kind of game. But then 7 came out, and I was like, oh shit, this is scary, and the survival aspect's so cool, and all that stuff. And I was like, oh man, I'm excited to see what they do next. And they're like, we're gonna remake the past games. And I was like, aw. But then they came out with the remake for Resident Evil 2, and I was like, oh shit, this is really cool. Because not only, they could have just done the standard remastering of increasing or bettering the graphics, which is essentially what they did for 1.
Yeah, like that's kind of what it was, essentially.
But with this game, they basically rebuilt it, from the ground up, and we're just like, yeah, so we'll basically keep the story, we'll keep some of the moments, but then other moments we're going to completely change. We're going to add new enemies, and they made the camera. The camera, I think, is the biggest change.
Yeah, oh god.
The original game, it was just a stationary camera, and you can move your character almost tank control-ish, and just have to rely on the camera not fucking you. With this game, you got the normal third-person, over-the-shoulder thing, and man, does it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things where it's like I understand like the design choice from the original where it's like the fixed camera because like there's a greater sense of suspense and less control.
Well, and technology was
a
lot less advanced.
That too, that's very true. But I feel like there's a point when there's too much of a lack of control that it can be just kind of frustrating, where I think that little change is like enough to really keep you engaged in the horror, because you're still like, controls aren't amazing for obvious reasons, but it's still like functional. It still like feels like you can do something.
Yeah, and like if they just did a graphic remastering of 2, it's not a game that I think I would ever buy or even watch people play. But since they did the ground up, I've seen so many people play it. I've seen Let's Players who did Leon A, Claire B, and then I've seen some Let's Players who do the Claire A, Leon B, and all that type of stuff. And it's like, I've gotten into the Resident Evil franchise because of that remake.
Yeah, and just checking out, like, the difference from what it was from the original game.
Yeah, I think the one thing that they could have done, which would have been a big change from Resident Evil 2, the original, but I think could have improved the remake more, is if you play, let's say, Leon, or let's say Claire A and then Leon B. And the idea behind it is you go through the first time, and it's almost like its own game of, here's what Leon did that night. Then you're like, oh, but what did Claire do that night? And you go back and kind of see her side of it. There's a lot of levels where it's like, yeah, we just have you guys do the same level and the same thing plays out, but now you're her type of thing. Whereas, like, from a logic standpoint, it's like, but Leon killed that person. Why is Claire at the same time fighting that person and killing that person? Does it make sense? I think it would have been really cool for the remake. They kind of did some, either like, no, now this level is only a Claire level, and this level is only a Leon level.
Yeah, going back and forth from
there.
Visit
the location that Leon went to in the first part, and you see it's all destroyed from that battle.
Exactly, yeah, like, you it's not just the same story from one character. It's like, oh, they could affect one another's story within the game.
Yeah, like,
not
I think,
make it so concrete. Like.
I think that would have been a really cool change that I wish they'd make, but who knows? I hope they're doing a remake of Resident Evil 3.
They most likely are. I'm trying to remember if Resident Evil 3 was something that was, like, well received when it came out.
But even that, like, I would love to see them remake the action shooter games and make them survival horror.
Yeah, that would be cool, I'd say.
Like, if they're changing things enough to do the camera switch.
Yeah. I hope, if they are continuing this trend of remakes, I kind of hope that they don't remake Resident Evil 4, though, because it's good enough as it is, I'd say.
Though, a graphic increase could be cool.
Yeah, of course.
Like, that's one of those games to where I don't think they change the story of it if they remade it.
Yeah, no, I think, like, if they can keep the engine with, like, control-wise and story-wise, but, like, yeah, just graphical tweak would be, fine. Pay another $60.
Yeah, so, I'm just glad they did that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, anyway, that's all I got for Wishlist Games. You guys got any other?
Not that I can think of.
That's pretty much it. I mean, there's some games that are on my best games of 2019 that are kind of also wish game list, but we'll just wait until then.
Yeah. Well, funny you mentioned that, because now we're on to the best games of 2019.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Those are in order for me.
Gotcha. So, Luke, do you have any best TV shows, though?
I actually have 4 TV shows. There is one game that I did play, though.
Okay. For
approximately, like, 2 hours before.
Hold on. Can you save that game for the end? Because I think we'll be talking about it then.
Okay, then I'll just talk about TV shows then. So, I guess it's out of 4 then for TV shows. Number 4 for me is Watchmen, actually, the HBO series. Which, it was something I was actually very excited to see because I really love Watchmen. More the comic, not as much the film. But I just really love the kind of concept around it and was really interested to see where they take this because it's not just a direct adaptation. It's more like expanding on the source material.
Which I think is a great idea.
Yeah, and I think they did it really, really well, honestly. It's one of those things where it's like it keeps a lot of the thematic stuff about Watchmen, but it isn't super, super tied to it to, like, like a extreme degree. It's able to kind of take the imagery, but, like, make some interesting, like, evolutions of it, like, essentially like Rorschach's influence after he's died is kind of one of those things like, yeah, now thinking about it, that kind of makes sense. Oof. But then there's just like interesting kind of character stuff, and like the new characters that they have on the show are pretty interesting, and I really like how they develop them. It's one of those things that's like, I'm really surprised at how weird it is. It is because Watchmen was something that is kind of weird in concept already because of the alternate history element and just.
Well, and if you know the graphic novel, the fucking octopus.
The octopus thing, yeah. Pretty much. And this show kind of just seems to go more into the weirder elements of it, but not like to a point where it compromises like the dramatic stuff. For the most part, there's times where I'm just kind of like, I have no idea what the fuck is going on. Why is there a police officer with a panda hat? Anyway, but like, the show overall works very well, and there's times like dialogue is a bit hokey, but like I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like a J.J. Abrams element that actually works, where it's like I'm interested in like the mystery of like where this is all leading to, and when it did, I was like, oh, that was actually really satisfying and was fitting for what it was. So I won't spoil like exactly what happens by the end of it, but it's all really nicely wound together, and I really enjoyed it quite a bit. Even
cool.
even for some of the more like out there elements.
Yeah, and I'm someone who's a big fan of the graphic novel and actually the Zack Snyder film. I think that's probably aside from like 300, my favorite Zack Snyder film. So I'm very excited for the show. I haven't sat down to watch it yet, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so Dylan, what you got for best games of 2019?
Number 5, it's kind of a meme, but Tetris 99.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, it's Tetris. They did a lot of stuff that Tetris hasn't done before. And
well, competitive multiplayer.
Yeah, that's pretty much
Yeah.
it, which is a really cool concept. Like, they're straight up, like, championships for Tetris 99. Like, it's just kind of mind-blowing. After all this time, how popular this game is. Because overall, the concepts of the game haven't changed one bit since even the original Tetris came out. Like, Tetris has stayed Tetris at its roots. But they continue to do stuff to make it different, and I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
That even in 2019, and obviously into 2020, Tetris is thriving and doing well.
Yeah, like, I always envisioned Tetris as, it's a fun game, but it's kind of that, I always thought of it like an isolistic game, to where you're just kind of like on your phone or on a computer or on whatever, just kind of playing it by yourself, trying to best yourself. So I thought it was a phenomenal decision to change how that worked, to make it, no, now you're competing.
Now you're competing against
99
yourself
people.
and everybody else.
Exactly. And I think that just adds such an element of kind of stress on it, and like, you really want to perform well, because everyone else sees how you're doing. And I just think that's such a cool concept.
And I think it's interesting, because back in September now, the end of September, I actually saw one of the best Tetris 99 players play it in person, and they're just insane.
Yeah.
Like, they literally see the piece, and then they just make a move and just make it go down instantly. Like, they just, their brains are moving so quickly, and it just blows my mind away.
Yeah. Man, that's cool. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's one of those games that, like, when it came out, I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. And then the rest of the year went by and it happened. And I was like, oh yeah, Tetris 99 was a thing. Oh yeah, huh, yeah. But,
yeah.
Alright. So, my best game is actually a controversial one for number 3. It's one that received not great reception, but I actually think, for what it was good. I think its mistake was in its marketing. And that is Days Gone.
Ooh, yeah.
Which, I think the biggest problem of it was it had, before it came out, I think maybe a year or two before it came out, this incredible E3 trailer. And essentially what it is a zombie apocalypse game, where the E3 trailer is this character going into kind of this, I don't remember what it was, like a junkyard type of thing, or a construction site, and you see like 1,000 zombies, and it's this really intense game. And obviously the E3 trailer was all gameplay, but you know the person had played it 100 times beforehand, so he knew exactly where to turn and where to move. But the idea was that you'd be making all those choices live, of like, run under that thing, and then hopefully break that, and then do this, and then try and get away from these zombies.
In the right sequence.
Yeah. And when it came out, though, it was not at all that game. Like, people did comparison videos where they went to that spot on the map, and there are like 100-ish zombies, and not all the ways to get away from the zombie that were in the trailer were actually in the game. And I think that's one of those cases of they're like, oh yeah, let's make this game. And they sat down to make that game and went, fuck, we don't have the money or the technology or the anything to actually make that happen.
Yeah, they just made a really interesting trailer, and they're just like, wait, how are you actually going to do that, though?
Whereas the actual game, it's a biker zombie survival game, where your main character is a biker, and it's kind of this bike. I think of it as like a discount Last of Us on a motorcycle. And that's game. It's a lot of story, actually. And not a lot of that element that was in the trailer.
Yeah, not as much like the crazy kind of chase sequence element.
Yeah, because those chase sequences in the game are maybe half that intense. And fairly infrequent. They are somewhat frequent, but not at all like that. It's a totally different game from what they marketed it as. So I think my personal belief is a lot of the bad reception came from, yes, glitches and different things like that, but also, I think the marketing of the game. People went in with expectations that it would be this when it was actually this. When if they marketed the game as this,
it would have done a lot.
I think it would have done a lot better, and people would think of it more fondly. Whereas I honestly, when the game came out, forgot about that trailer, saw it as this, and then a week later was like, oh shit, it was that.
It was
supposed to be this.
Yeah, and yeah, like an actual, it was supposed to be this. Just marketing was different.
Yeah. So, and again, it's not the oh my god game of all time. But I still think it's a good game that's better than people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, yeah.
Even like the story elements, I'm like, I actually thought that was a really cool concept. And like, they're like, it deals with some kind of weird shit of like, some of the zombies just are cannibals and eat each other. And like, it asks a question that you never wanted to know the answer to in a way that horrifies you, but I think in a way that a lot of other places, The Walking Dead did, but like, we haven't seen a whole lot of like, oh yeah, what if a kid gets bit? That's a zombie kid. And it's kind of in a heartbreaking way of like, oh shit, I gotta put down a zombie kid.
Zombie boy. Yeah.
Like, and like,
that's not
fun.
That's
like a 2-year-old that got bit. And you're like, fuck. And it's like, different elements like that. And the whole riding a bike through an area is a cool concept. And they're like, they're like nests of zombies. And I think there's some cool ideas that, because of its reception, people overlook.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why that's on my list.
That's cool.
Fair. So, Luke, what you got for TV?
For number 3, my third pick is Mindhunter Season 2. It's a Netflix original series at the moment. I saw the first season back, oh god, it was like a year and a half before the second season came out, so there's a lot of gap in time between those seasons. But it's a great series, essentially about like 2 FBI agents that go into like investigating the ideas of psychology for serial killers, and it's really interesting because it's kind of an investigative story, but it's also more sort of a character study. At least the first season is, of the main character, who at first is sort of like, yeah, this is something that we need to do for the safety of like other people, but then at some point he kind of becomes more like genuinely like invested in it to a point where it's kind of concerning for him and everyone else around him. So the season ended on sort of an ambiguous note where it was like, what's it gonna be for him later on? And we kind of just get more of that through this season. This time around, there's kind of more of a focus on a particular person for like the last half of the season. I don't remember exactly like the specific like person it was, but like they have like a focus this time around rather than like the first season was more just them interviewing these different people, them trying to like engage in all the documents and like trying to understand the psychology of it. But there's a lot more character kind of development this time around, not as much of the investigative stuff, and it's really engaging and it's really good. And I mean, it's definitely well made because it's got like David Fincher as one of the main directors on it. But yeah, there's some. The only thing like issue wise that I have with it is that it kind of can be a little bit meandering the first half, and there's like certain times where they have like a very famous like person that they have someone to like recreate for the series. Most of the time I'd say it works well, but there's like one where it kind of borders on being goofy, I'd say, which isn't great considering the subject matter, but everything else is like really well executed, and I would definitely recommend. And it has like some really nice little moments of humor there to make it kind of not just horribly depressing. But it's a really engaging series, and I would recommend it even for season 2.
Nice. Yeah, that's one of those series I've heard nothing but good things about, but I've never had the thought of like, oh, I need to sit down and invest my time in that. But hearing that, that's good to hear.
Yeah. No, it's still keeping its strength for season 2. I'm just hoping that season 3 won't take like another 2 years to come out.
Alright, Dylan, what we got next on games?
My number 4 game is a game that I played for about 25 seconds, which would be Link's Awakening. It's a remaster of the original game, but 1, graphics look really well done. 2, it just looks like a lot of fun, really. I mean,
yeah. And
obviously, it being a Switch game makes it a really good travel game.
That's true. From what I saw of it, it does seem like it would be a very good travel game.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I can't complain with that aspect of it. I don't have much else to say other than... Because, I mean, I didn't play the original one, so I don't really have any expectations for it, so...
That's fair. So, my number 2 is it's a game that the trailer looked great for, but I was kind of like, they're gonna fuck it up. And I actually really like is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and I'm mainly talking about the campaign of it, because I was an uber fan of the Modern Warfare trilogy of games. Like, for me, that's Call of Duty at its best. Like, even the Blackout games, I never got invested in half as much as I did the Modern Warfare games. And everything since I've been kind of having this stuff like, man, I wish they'd get back to the quality of Modern Warfare and have those kind of characters that I could long term over like several games get invested in. And then they did the Modern Warfare game. I was like, okay, let me check out what this is about. And I loved the campaign for it. It wasn't perfect. There were some moments where I was like, oh, that was stupid. But it did some really interesting things. And the one thing which they didn't really reveal until the end is that it's a reboot of the Modern Warfare games. Which I think is a really cool idea. And the thing I think I like the most about it is it really does a good job of showing how messed up war can be, which is one of the main staples of the Modern Warfare trilogy. Of like, hey, Modern Warfare, it's messed up. Like,
yeah.
To the point where, like, Price, there are moments where it's like, oh man, this war hero Price, but then you're with Price and you're like, he does some messed up shit.
Like you get this image of like an absolute war hero, but then in reality it's like, oh, is that why? Oh no.
Like, there's a moment where you guys just captured someone to interrogate, and the game's like, the previous Modern Warfare games always had this thing where it's like, hey, this has some messed up stuff, do you want to skip this level? The equivalent of it in this game is like, do you want to be present or not present for the torture?
Like pretty much like bluntly stated.
Yeah. And even in that torture room sequence, it lets you make choices. To where it's like, how do you want to go about this? Do you want to do that? Fuck no. Okay, do you want to do this? Oh my, okay. And then there's even, like, it ends with like, alright, do you want to kill the guy or do you want to let him live? It's like, this big time terrorist who you now know has, like, a family and a wife. I think, oh man, I'm remembering the torture sequence now.
Oh no.
So you're literally torturing this one guy in front of his wife and young daughter.
Ooh, that's kind of a shitty
So
situation there,
I
isn't
think
it?
they're watching you, like, drive a screwdriver through his hand, shooting him in his body in non-lethal areas and shit like that, while he's pleading to them, like, don't watch, close your eyes, that type of shit. And it's like, it's fucked up.
And it's like, and it's something that you probably wouldn't have found in like other kinds of like shooter-based games, where it's the very morally like ambiguous elements.
Where like I like that they're treating it as like, you're the good guys and you're doing this. It's not glorifying war. It's showing how messed up both sides are.
Exactly. It's a sort of like mutually destructive.
Yeah, it's a game where you're playing it, and sure, you're being entertained, but the whole time you're like, I feel really uncomfortable with what I'm doing. And I think that had a lot of courage for them to do in 2019.
Yeah,
of all years.
Of all years. There's only like one other game from what you're describing that I could think of that kind of reminds me of that sort of style. Have you heard of Spec Ops: The Line?
Yes, I have.
I think that's the only kind of game I can think of from what you're describing so far. I haven't played the game or seen the game for myself, but like that level of like moral ambiguity in between, like, you know, the elements of fun shootiness, but you're kind of also like back of your head like, this is very wrong. Something is very wrong about this.
Yeah, and something the game did that totally could have been like, oh, well, that's disrespectful, or oh, that is cheesy, campy, whatever you want to call it. Fan service? I don't know if there's fan service in war games, so I guess this would be close to it. They did recreate some historical events in there. Like, one of them is, they don't say this is what they're recreating, but you're playing it and it's like, oh, this is supposed to be how the killing of Osama bin Laden. I'm in that right now. Oh, shit. And it's so intense, because you're literally going house from house, the dead of night, with night vision goggles, clearing one room at a time.
It's essentially like that scene from Zero Dark 30, like the way they're recreating it like that.
Yeah, and it's so intense and immersive. And this game is immersive in the best and worst ways at the same time.
Yeah,
and
the ways that engage you emotionally.
Yeah, and it's like, Yeah, I just give them so much credit for putting those kind of things in a game in 2019. Like, the amount of balls that takes.
Yeah.
Is insane. So, yeah, that's why that is on my best of the year games list.
Awesome.
And also the fact that I've been mainly talking about campaign. The multiplayer, the fact they had the courage, because it's not the typical COD multiplayer. They change up a lot of stuff, for better and for worse in some cases. And there are still issues with the multiplayer, but the thing I'll give them credit for is that they're still putting out patches and working on stuff.
Well, and I give them a lot of credit for Gunfight.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really cool concept that we haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think them taking a chance and putting in this new game mode is probably a good thing.
Yeah, and I think to kind of end off my thoughts on this game, it gives me hope for the future of Call of Duty games. Because I've been kind of at a point now towards, like, they're putting out good games that, you know, you'll play for a couple weeks and then forget about.
Which is why I stopped buying them.
Yeah.
Because, like, I bought World War II,
yeah,
played it for, like, 2 weeks, and then I never touched it again.
Mm-hmm.
It's sitting on my shelf, and I haven't touched it.
But I was worried that, like, the best memorable games are behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And this game gives me the thought of, like, oh, there's the right foundation here to where they can maybe, I don't know if this is one of those games, but in the next couple years, get back on track to be putting out those kind of games again.
Which I think will be interesting, because we don't have really much news on another Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'll be curious to see. But unfortunately, I'm pretty sure it's going back to a more futuristic Black Ops thing.
Which kind of bumps me.
I don't like that at all.
I honestly wish they had more time between games as opposed to, like, hey, this year's Call of Duty, just cranking them out.
Mm.
And they've really invested some more time, like what Assassin's Creed did.
But the thing is, they know that people are still going to buy it.
Yeah, which is a bummer. But, like, yeah, anyway. But those are my thoughts with Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Luke, what you got TV-wise?
For number 2 on my favorite TV shows of the year is Chernobyl, the miniseries, which you've seen because of our class that we had. And yeah, it's just, like, very tightly constructed. It's one of those things that's, like, no moment feels, like, unnecessary to me. Like, every single moment has some purpose and some, like, meaning behind it for the rest of the series, and I've always loved that shows that are very much into, like, the little details and little bits of information. This seems to be just kind of nothing really but that. Like, there's always going to be just, like, moments that may be exaggerated for the sense of, like, drama, because, you know, you need to keep the TV show interesting for everyone to keep watching.
Mm-hmm.
But most of it is just the events of the actual, like, disaster were sort of engaging as it was, because it was literally, like, world-threatening, life-threatening kind of stakes at hand.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting, all of the little, like, cogs that were going in as it was, like, happening with, like, politicians and the and, like, the scientists trying to get it all working together, and basically just how it barely even worked. Like, it barely was even going to work, and somehow it all came together by the end. But then the rest of the show kind of gills into, like, the hiding of secrets, sort of, like, the Russian sort of, like, interference going on there, and just how the rest of the world was kind of reacting to it. But it's more just kept in the space of the actual event in Russia, rather than, like, what America was thinking about it, or what, like, other countries were thinking about it. It's, like, kind of the immediacy of, like, not knowing what the fuck is going on and trying to, like, find the truth in, like, a whole field of nothing but lies, essentially.
Yeah, and, like, one thing that I love about it is how it's always so tonally and thematically consistent in every moment, in every scene, in a very show-don't-tell way of driving the theme into your head to the point where a character doesn't have to say it, you feel it.
Yeah, like, it's one of those things, like, there's bits of information or something that character may be thinking that they could have easily done, like, they're gonna say it for the sake of the audience, but, like, it is very clear in almost every single moment what is, like, the danger at hand, or what is, like, the kind of concern going on with everyone. And I like that you mentioned it's tonally consistent, because there's, like, other shows that maybe would have had moments of, like, maybe, like, a comedy to sort of, like, alleviate that tension, but the reality of this situation does not need the humor. It's kind of, it's too, like, urgent for it to work, and I think they knew how to have maybe little tiny bits of it, but it's not like enough so to be really notable. It's mostly keeping you drenched in sort of that dread throughout the whole series.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also a series that at first, when it was announced and all that kind of stuff, I think it was on this podcast, I made a joke of like, the last episode ends with like, oh man, good thing the reactor still works, boom, and then just it being that kind of stuff. But the way they executed it was so smart, and like I've heard podcasts of it, it's like, where the writer was talking about like, everyone knows the reactor blows up, so that's like the first thing that happens. Mm-hmm. And I think that was such a smart choice to make.
It really was. I think because then we have the inciting incident, and then we just learn everything from it, like, piece by piece.
From a character standpoint, of the characters being like, how the fuck did that happen?
Yeah, like, every single character has it on their mind, and so we get a better picture of it by seeing it through each character's, like, point of view, essentially.
As opposed to the before it happened version of it, to where the character's like, let's do this decision because that's smart, and then the audience is like, nope, that's not smart. And it just then would become more frustrating.
Exactly. And it's just kind of amazing how well written of a series it is, because the screenwriter mainly has done movies beforehand, but like, I'm hoping I'm remembering this correctly, but the kinds of movies he wrote before this were like Movie 43, and like really bad. Oh, like he wrote the Scary Movie films.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just decided to make this, and it's kind of like, holy shit, there's really like a lot of talent that he actually has. It's just, it depends on like what he's working on, I guess.
And what you mentioned, he worked on movies before. This feels like it could be a 5-hour movie.
It really does. Like, it's so, like, well, it has a very cinematic element to it, even for like a miniseries, and just production value wise and almost everything. It feels, it's honestly like if I was putting this in favorite films of the year, it would definitely be like in the top 10, honestly. But it's a miniseries, so like people would be like, that's not a movie, that's just multiple movies put together.
Idiot.
Stupid. But yeah, no, that series is honestly like so perfectly like put together, and probably is definitely some of the best television in the past few years that I've seen.
Yeah. Alrighty. So Dylan, what you got for best games?
So should I just say 3 and 2 at the same time to try and catch up to you guys? Because you guys are at 1. So at number 3, I have Luigi's Mansion.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, fuck, I forgot that came out. Shit, I should put it on Wishlist.
I'm enjoying it a lot so far. I'm a couple hours in, and I think overall it's visually appealing for 1. 2, again, it just has like a cool concept behind it. Just the whole Luigi's Mansion concept. And there's also some DLC releasing soon, which I'm really curious to see how that turns out. And again, it being a Switch game just makes your life so much better because it can be played anywhere. And then at number 2, I have The Outer Worlds.
Okay.
Which, to me, I've always been a big fan of like the early Fallout games. Even like basically all the way up to Fallout 4. I really enjoyed what they did with it.
You mean you don't like 76?
No, unfortunately.
Crazy.
But the idea of having like a Fallout-esque themed game in space was kind of exciting to me, and like everything I've seen of it makes it look really fun and makes it look like a really good game. So I think it's one of those things where at the moment I wasn't fully committed. Like, I'm still not ready to spend $60 on it because I know I'm not going to be able to dedicate a lot of time to it initially. So it's one of those games where I'd rather pick up while it's on sale for like $25 and just play when I have the time to, rather than, like, no disrespect to the game, but it's just, obviously with our lives now, it's like, time is very scarce.
Yeah, could you imagine if we had time to do like things like
how we did?
Yeah, man.
Oh, the good old days.
So yeah, that is my number 2 game of 2019.
Well, my number 1 game, which when we did our anticipated list last year, the only thing I had was a title for the game. We knew nothing about it. But now that the game has come out and I'm in love with it, it has become my number 1 choice for best game of the year, and that is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
And that was also the only game I played this year.
Yeah. Which, man. So, just to kind of, I could go on and talk about this game for a long time, but I guess main thing I want to talk about is after launch Battlefront 2 was what it was, and even how EA treated Titanfall 2 when that came out. I'm glad that EA let Respawn have a single player Star Wars game that they could do what they wanted with no microtransactions and just be released.
Like, kind of a miracle. Like,
Honestly.
genuinely.
And even that aside, the game itself is awesome. Like, I think my favorite part is the first level of it is so cool, and I think that's such a fascinating premise and everything you do throughout the game. The gameplay itself, the kind of
The gameplay
Dark
is so
Souls-y,
good.
Uncharted vibe of it with Star Wars is so refreshing and cool.
Yeah, I was actually definitely going to mention the Uncharted feel, especially from that, like, kind of train crash sequence in, like, the beginning reminded me so much of, like, the opening of Uncharted 2. But, yeah, no, it's, like, it has a real sense of, like, both, like, just, like, the fun kind of lightsaber play going on, but, like, the actual kind of adventurous element of it, too.
Yeah, and it somehow balances it to where it's, like, you're a Jedi who can cut through stormtroopers, but you can't just, like, mindlessly play the game. You have to be aware of the combat system. Like, okay, I need to parry here, then I can take advantage of this attack here, and then do this. And, like, the boss fights can be actually really difficult and intimidating.
They really can, honestly, yeah. And, like, sort of compare it to something like Force Unleashed, which is a game I love, but, like, the combat can be pretty, like, simple for the most part. It's more just kind of like platforming adventure stuff.
Just spam X and you're fine.
Exactly. Whereas this has like a genuine kind of weight to the combat, and like as you're saying, you've got
purposeful combat.
Yes, exactly. That's actually a very good way to say it. It's like purposeful, kind of in just the way that you play it. You can't just mow down people.
Yeah. Well, and the difference of how you can 1v1 a stormtrooper, but as soon as they're like 5, 6, 7, it's like, oh fuck, I need to play this smart.
Exactly.
So a game, so as far as like a combat comparison, where does it compare as far as like to like Spider-Man combat?
Oh, it's I've heard a lot of people compare it to Dark Souls, which I think, in my opinion, totally depends on the difficulty you set. Because if you set it to the hardest difficulty, sure, it's the Souls like Sekiro like kind of combat system.
Yeah, the From
But if you put it on a lower difficult, the main thing the difficulty changes is the amount of time you have to parry an attack and how aggressive the enemies are.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if I'd compare it to Spider-Man, because Spider-Man, you can move around really quick. This, your character has kind of a quick evade, but otherwise you're kind of staying back and constantly like blocking.
Because with Spider-Man, I will say, yes, you can move around a lot, but it still also does kind of feel somewhat button mashy. Just
Whereas
a little bit.
This, I don't think you really can button mash, because your enemies have like a block bar, to where as soon as you hit them enough to that block bar, you can actually get at their health. But basically what they're trying to do is wait for in your animation in time when you can't block, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna fuck you up now, and then they fuck you up then. So you have to be smart about how you attack, and you have a force meter in combat, to where it's like, this is how much force you have, and then you have to hit your enemies for that to recharge back up.
Gotcha.
So, like, your force attack, your heavy counts as a force attack, because apparently you're using the force to propel your lightsaber down in a more aggressive attack. So, like, you have to manage your force bar.
So the more force you have, the stronger attacks you can do.
Exactly. And, like, you unlock special abilities that all use your force.
Gotcha.
So, and then, like, if you parry an attack, if you parry a stormtrooper, that's a one-hit kill. But there are other enemies to where it's like, that parry may only knock out, like, 5% of their health, and as long as they have their block bar, you can't parry them, type of thing. There's combat like that in there.
Gotcha.
And yeah, like, there are bosses to where it's like, oh yeah, you can, as soon as you land on that planet, go fuck up that boss. But you're not going to fuck up that boss. That boss is going to destroy you 100 times over. Until you play through the rest of the map, gain new abilities, you know, upgrade some stuff, and then you can go back and maybe still get fucked up by that boss, but hopefully not.
Pretty much.
And it's not all, like, lightsaber bosses. They're like, you go to this planet, oh yeah, this is this legendary animal that's on this planet, this in between you and blank. And a lot of the game is, You go to one planet, you learn something new story-wise. Then you go to this other planet, learn a new ability, so that you can, if you want, go back to that planet and unlock more areas. So there's only like, I don't know, 6, 7 planets, I think. Something like that. But you go back to them different times, and each time you unlock more of the map, and it's huge.
And I will say, so I kind of did have a little bit of the story spoiled to me, and I will say some of the plot twists that game pulls, I would not expect them to pull.
Mm-hmm. And what it does at the end is one that I actually really like, and I think it's neat, because the whole point of the game, you're doing this one thing. And the twist at the end is kind of a thing to where it's like, no, I would probably do that in that situation, having learned what I learned over the course of different things.
I think my biggest issue overall with that game is just, once you're done with it, it just doesn't really have extra playability.
I think that's fair, although I think that's also true of a fair amount of single-player games. Like, what's nice about Spider-Man is it has those side missions. Where this game, there aren't really side missions.
Which I kind of wish
areas
they had
of a map.
A
like, I think the equivalent to that is the maps are so big that you don't have to go around to all of it. But there are different unlockable things and cosmetics.
Well, and granted, and the game itself is long enough as it is, but I think even just having a couple side missions on each planet could just add that little bit of extra, but...
Yeah. For me, my biggest complaint with it is, at launch, it was glitchy.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that too.
There, of course, there's some glitches to where it's like, oh yeah, if you accidentally go into this one area of the map, you can't get back. Type of thing, and then they're like...
Yikes.
There shouldn't be glitches in a single-player game.
Yeah, well, in, God of War, they had glitches, but then they begged the studio for, I think it was another month to iron out those glitches, and then it launched and it was great, because they had that time. I wish I don't know if EA would have, and maybe they didn't, EA said no, asked for EA for more time to iron out these glitches. Because there's so many times to where it's it'll start a cutscene, and not all the cutscene is rendered in. So you just have, things pop into the cutscene that weren't there at the start.
They need to load before, which, granted, could be, what you're running it on, but ultimately it probably falls on the game as well.
Yeah, there's so many things to where it's, the cutscene will start, and you're staring at, a wall or something, and then what's supposed to be on that wall renders in. Or it's you're looking at something, and then a character just pops in halfway through.
No, yeah, you get a sneak peek because the wall doesn't render in, so you get to see everything behind it first.
Little things like that, sure, you could patch out, but the fact that it was there at launch, and to my knowledge, still is in some moments, is kind of a bummer. Detractor. But I definitely think this game should get a sequel, especially because of the ending of it. And I would absolutely love that, because then they could do more things graphically, gameplay-wise, change things up a little bit. And also, hopefully, have EA's blessing to get enough time to iron out bugs like that.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll learn from their mistakes this time.
Yeah, but
hopefully.
Man, Respawn has had a great track record, I will say.
Yeah.
Of Titanfall, Titanfall 2, Apex Legends, and now this.
Yeah.
Give that studio more money.
Really, honestly, by this point, it's obvious that they have good quality control for their productions.
Yeah, but anyway, so Luke, what you got?
All right, so for my favorite show of 2019 is actually a very kind of under the radar series. It's not really something I've heard much of anybody really talk about, but I just discovered recently, and I just absolutely love it. It's an Adult Swim series, but it's not really what you would kind of expect from Adult Swim. It's a show called Joe Pera Talks With You. It's essentially I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. You know how Adult Swim shows are known for very crude, excessive kind of crass humor.
Really?
Yeah, no shit. Have you seen Eric Andre? Most basic thing ever. This is the exact opposite of that. It's the most weirdly wholesome series I've ever seen in my life, and it's somehow really funny because of how modest it is.
Huh.
And it's one of those things where it's I've always expected when I'm watching the show, okay, something is gonna go where this suddenly becomes really fucked up, and it never happens. It's just genuine this really wonderful little series, and it's one of those things where it's not really funny, but then there's like points where like once you get invested into the kind of tone it is, it really becomes hilarious even for moments that you really shouldn't find like all that funny. It's just something that I really really love because it's like it's almost the exact opposite of like what you'd find in TV, something like you gotta like have a massive conflict going on for the whole thing. This is just kind of a show where like the main character talks about like random things in this weird kind of like he's like 30 but he acts like a grandpa essentially. And it's something that like at first I was like I'm not sure if I'm fully into this yet, but like then I found that I watched like the entire series over one night, and it's something that I've enjoyed quite a bit, and I would recommend to everyone because it's just a wonderful series.
Yeah, that's cool. I haven't really heard anything about it, but that's cool to hear.
Yeah. There's the best way to kind of get a vibe for it is there's interviews with the main actor on like Stephen Colbert and some other like talk shows, and he still stays in character. So, and honestly, it's gotten to the point where I'm kind of questioning if that's just how he acts, or if that's just a character he's been playing for like the past few years. But yeah, just would really recommend. I love it, like all of it.
Cool. Alright, Dylan, what you got for number 1?
So, for number 1 game of 2019, which you already talked about in your Wishlist Games, is Borderlands 3.
Oh,
dang.
okay.
So, I have dabbled in the earlier games, and I watched a lot of Borderlands 3, and I actually just picked it up like last week since it was on sale for $25. So, I mean, there's not much to say other than fantastic story, looks really visually appealing.
Yeah.
The cool co-op aspect that we talked about earlier, and everything just comes together, and there just wasn't really any flaws to the game, which ultimately, like with games nowadays, you kind of expect there to be flaws, unfortunately, because I mean games are getting so massive that you could have 10 people look over something and stuff is still bound to slip by. Like, there's nothing you can do about it, really. But, so to find a game like this that, I mean, I haven't seen any direct flaws is kind of nice to see.
Yeah. And you can tell that they took their time with that game, which is so admirable.
Well, yeah, because what? Borderlands, let's see really quick. Borderlands 2. Release date. So Borderlands 2 came out in 2012.
Wow.
So they took 7 years to produce this game.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, and then one last thing on the note of like TV shows that I wanted to note really quick is I guess it's a TV show, even though it's more of a documentary series, is I just want to give like a shout out to Kevin Hart's documentary series.
Oh, he did have a documentary series?
Yeah, he released it like a week ago, the 27th of December, so just at the end of 2019. But, yeah, I mean, the fact is that he opened his entire life pretty much. And basically the documentary series, it's like an open book. Like, he talks about everything. He talks about the whole Oscars thing. He talks about his car accident. He talks about his cheating scandal. He talks about everything. And
I'm going to have to check that out.
It's like 6 30-minute episodes, so it's like 3 hours. And, but I do like that it's broken up into episodes, so you don't feel obligated to sit down and watch it all at one time. Whereas
he's not the Irishman. He's not Scorsese. Come on.
He could have they could have easily put it all into like technically just made it a film, but I think breaking it up into 30-minute episodes is reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I want to end it off on there. But we still have the anticipated.
Yes, the anticipated games of 2020. So we'll continue going around. I'll start this one off. So, my number 3 most anticipated game of 2020 is Halo Infinite. So, I'm a big Halo fan.
That's your most or
number 3?
Okay, number 3.
I'm a big Halo fan, and past couple Halo games I've liked elements of, but overall, they haven't captured the magic of Halo 1 through 3 or even Halo Reach. But from the trailer, it really seems like they're taking it back to form in a way that, yes, is somewhat kind of the crowd pleaser type of way with like the design of Master Chief and all that kind of stuff. But it also gives me hope for the writing, because like the main trailer they had featured on this kind of new character and was a lot more of a character piece of them and kind of the lore of Master Chief and kind of the legend he's become. And I found that really interesting. So I hope that it's a lot more of a character piece than a lot of other games, because it's clearly been working for games like Last of Us, God of War, where it's a deep dive into a character. So I think that would be a really cool direction for Halo Infinite. There's not a whole lot of information of if that's the case, but it feels like they're taking Halo in a new direction that pays homage to the original 3.
That's fair.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, I'm a sad Halo fan nowadays until Reach came out on the Master Chief Collection. Now it's kind of fun to be a Halo fan again, but still one of those things where it's like, man, I bought an Xbox One because of Halo, and I've missed out on so many great games because of that.
Yeah.
So here's to hoping that they can kind of rectify Halo and resurrect it from the dead. Because at the moment, the best of Halos in the past, literally with Master Chief Collection proving that correct.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Alright. Luke, what you got?
I've actually got 4. I did just a quick check to see like what games are coming out in 2020. For number 4 is Oddworld Soulstorm. Have you ever heard of the Oddworld games?
No, I haven't.
It's essentially like it was a game series that started off with like the PS1, but they sort of revitalized it recently with like PS4 remasters, which I haven't played yet, but they look fantastic. And essentially, there's this sort of like 2D platformer-esque kind of puzzle solver game series that's like a very interesting, like kind of weird aesthetic to it, and very like cartoonish, but it's also kind of terrifying at times. And I don't know much about like what is new to this one, if it's like another remaster or if it's like a new game in the series, which something makes me think it's probably like just another remaster of one of the games, because they haven't had like a new installment since like 2003, I'd say. And so maybe they're trying to revitalize the series, but whatever it is, I'm really excited for new games
Cool.
of any kind at all. And it has like a very unique sense of humor and is kind of difficult at times, and it has a really interesting gameplay mechanic of kind of like you can talk to like you're essentially part of this like weird kind of alien-esque species that are trying to escape from this factory that you're being enslaved into, and so you talk to other people by creating like they call it like game speak, where like you have like a combination of buttons. You can say something like follow me, stay here, whatever, when you're trying to like help them get out. And it's essentially like kind of like a jailbreak game in a way.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know what it is necessarily, but I just know there's a new game coming out, so I'm just kind of automatically excited for it.
Okay. That's nice. Alright, Dylan, what you got?
One thing I was going to suggest is maybe he says his third game as well, so we can all just be on the same place.
So what's your third game?
Third game is the new Animal Crossing game, and it's just because I love Animal Crossing, and that's kind of just to summarize it. Like it looks. I don't remember seeing any new additions that we haven't already seen yet, but just I probably won't be able to play it, but I just love the series very much so, and that's kind of that's all I have to say on that.
Nice.
So at number 5, I have Halo Infinite. Again, we don't have much information on it, which is a good or a bad thing at this point. It's just a stab in the dark, really. That's obviously why it's on anticipated games, because they're games we hope to be good.
Exactly.
But obviously we have no control or anything like that. At number 4, I have Breath of the Wild 2.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, fucking God. God damn it.
We don't have too much information about it. We got a little teaser of it. Again, it's a stab in the dark. Obviously, Breath of the Wild is a fan-freaking-tastic game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't have any they have high expectations to live up to, I will say.
Yeah.
So if they don't live up to it, they're gonna be kind of screwed. And then at number 3, I also have Animal Crossing, because it's Animal Crossing, and it's been a while since a new Animal Crossing game has came out. So
yeah, there was the Amiibo Mario Party thing, but that doesn't count.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We're all on the same page.
Nice. So, what I got
Number
next
2.
for anticipated games of 2020 is one that is going into the year, I think, as an underdog, but I'm pretty optimistic with it, is Marvel's Avengers. So, I honestly thought the trailer looked good and interesting. Sure, graphically, there are some things with it, but I think the main thing I like about it is the reason why I didn't like Ultimate Alliance 3 is it feels like they're taking kind of the success of Avengers and doing something different with it. I will say I'm kind of concerned by the amount of characters. The first trailer of interesting is like, oh, so it's the classic Avengers team minus, spoiler alert, Captain America.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's cool. And then there's a Hank Pym thing at the end. I was like, Hank Pym's technically a classic Avenger. Maybe he's kind of like a side character. That could be cool.
Yeah.
Then the DLC is gonna, this Marvel character's in it, that Marvel character's in it, that Marvel character's in it. I was like, whoa, calm down. Story first. Hold on.
Yeah,
Careful there. Nay, Bessie. Like, but I'm fairly hopeful. Granted, this past year, my hopefulness has proven to be bad, but I'm still optimistic with this game that if it really focuses on story and telling something original in the Avengers kind of lineup, I would be interested in it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah. Luke, what you got?
Number 2, this one's sort of kind of a weird one, because I don't really know if it's another case like Oddworld where it's like I don't know if it's like a spin-off game or if it's a sequel to the series, and I don't have the technology to play it, but it's the new Half-Life game.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what the fuck that's gonna be. I'm pretty certain it's not Half-Life 3. I'm definitely certain it's not Half-Life 3.
I honestly think they're at the point where they're not gonna make Half-Life 3, so they're just gonna make, oh, this is another Half-Life game, not 3. Another Half-Life game.
and people are just gonna like mentally try to be like cope with it and just be like, I guess this combination of like these 30 new Half-Life games are Half-Life 3.
Exactly.
Because you're talking about Half-Life Alyx?
Or
A-L-Y-X?
Alyx? Something like that.
Yes, which is a VR
game. Oh,
it's a
VR game.
Yeah, that's what I mean by like I have don't have the technology to play it. I'll just watch someone else play it.
Which is really cool and ballsy, I think. Just a VR story game. I
think it being VR is gonna save them.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Because people can't have that high of expectations for it because it's a VR game.
Yeah, exactly.
But
then they can still, graphically do some cool things with it, and story-wise do some cool things with it. Hey, but it's a VR, so it's like a side thing. You play, whatever.
I still would have preferred just it to be a regular game, but I'll take anything Half-Life at this point. It's like,
which is what they're going for.
It's sort of like the haven't heard anything from 30 years and you're just getting something. It's like, I'll take it. It's not anything at all, but I'll take it. It's probably going to be, I bet you it's going to be like an hour and a half game and everyone's going to hate it. But like, the possibility it could be something good.
I could see it being like 5 hours long, which for the hype that it has around it is kind of a cop-out. It being 5 hours long is kind of petty.
But what a fuck you if it's 1 hour. I didn't even think of that, but that would be so hilarious.
To be honest, though, I could kind of see that happening.
People go out and buy like full-blown VR setups just for it, and then it turns out to be 1 hour long.
Like, even if it's the best game ever at 1 hour, that's hilarious.
It would be... It's like... Well, I mean, like... The rest of Half-Life 2 was like an episodic like segments that were pretty short to begin with, so something kind of puts a bit of fear in me that that's probably gonna actually happen. But we'll see. I don't know what the fuck this is gonna be. I'm just like the excitement of it could possibly be good because it is still being made by Valve. It's not Hunt Down the Freeman. It's not Hunt Down the Freeman.
Which I also think if they're putting the name Half-Life on something, there's a certain quality check they're putting into it, at least I'd hope, of like, hey, let's have this extra team just look over it to make sure that it's actually decent.
Yeah, like there's some integrity that's built by that name, so you can't just have like,
And I do think that they do respect the name Half-Life because they are not making a Half-Life 3.
Exactly.
They know the pressure of putting the name Half-Life on something.
They're just like, we want to make something not Half-Life 3, but like everyone is going to be mad about it regardless.
We need some more money, but we're not making Half-Life 3, so...
Yeah, so they're just like, we're just going to make it good enough that people won't be mad at us that it's not Half-Life 3. Because people will be mad at us We just need something that's like good enough to kind of
to tease people and still sticking around for us.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, because at this point, like, what else does Valve have? But, like, because Portal doesn't seem like it's going to have a new game. Probably not new any Left 4 Deads.
I will say, you know how cool it would be to get a new Portal game
Mm-hmm.
with like this stage and age graphics.
Yeah.
I would die, actually, if that.
I'd say the same for you just said a new Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, or new Left 4 Dead.
But I think part of the reason they on a side note, I think part of the reason they stray away from making a new Portal game is because yeah, they can make a new story, but in the root of the game, it's gonna be the same thing.
Well, and yeah, it's hard to make new puzzles that can last the duration of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
the
Unless
thing.
they add new mechanics that make it not Portal.
Not Portal.
Yeah. Well, like, I've seen some, like, they're more like fan-made kind of mods that were able to kind of incorporate a lot of interesting things that still kept it being Portal. It's just that there's sort of a little bit of different things that kind of take into consideration now.
Yeah, which I've seen those, or maybe not all of them, but some of those as well. But being a studio who slaved over a Portal 1 and a Portal 2, doing a Portal 3, I think you at least need time, if not the ability to just not do it, of like, we gotta sit down and do that again, and better.
And better, with
Fuck.
much, like, with improved graphics and, like, the new engines of the time.
Whereas I think fans have the advantage of they didn't have to sit through the brain tedious work of doing 1, 2. They can just kind of go in having seen that and be like, oh cool, so let's try our thing of that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of where this is going with, like, the Half-Life game now. Is just like it's a new thing. It's not Half-Life 3. It's a new thing. So don't expect the same element of quality as maybe like the original, like at least the original for their time, of course.
Yeah.
But at least
nostalgia is also playing against Valve.
Yeah. Like I played Half-Life 2 recently, and I was like, I still love it. It's just that elements of it are kind of like
outdated.
Yeah, like in terms of like how we kind of use it now, but I still find it like a great game. It's just something you have to take into consideration.
Yeah.
But no, that's my number 2.
At my number 2 anticipated game of 2020, we have Cyberpunk 2077.
Ooh.
Nice.
Good one.
Looks really good. Keanu Reeves.
Reeves.
And I'm curious to see exactly where the story goes. I mean, I feel like I would wish we had a little bit more information going into it.
I do as well.
Because it's like one of those things where they're like, guys, it's going to look really good and we have Keanu Reeves. Please buy our game. But we're not going to tell you anything else.
Tone seems cool, right? Am I right? Yeah. You don't know what the tone's about, but the tone's cool, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Don't know where it's leading to.
So it's like, it has a lot of hype surrounding it. But I think if it doesn't live up to that hype, a year from now, when we're doing the best and worst of 2020, it could be on either end of the spectrum, depending on how it's executed.
Yeah,
definitely.
I can definitely see that.
And I will say that I do think at least me and you have the same number 1 game.
Yep.
So
is that a transition then?
Well, I mean,
should I just talk about my pick
think
first?
Sure, because I don't know if yours will be
I
the
don't
same
know
as
if yours
ours.
is the same.
Probably not. So I don't even know if it's coming out in 2020. It's just going to be my most anticipated until it comes out, which is Metroid Prime 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably never play it, but god fucking damn it, do I want to play it. I want to play it even now, not even knowing, like, seeing any footage, just being told, hey, Metroid Prime 4. I'm just like, hell yeah, please. Would love that. But I don't even know what it looks like. We haven't seen anything for a while now. It's still Prime production.
They haven't even announced it yet.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing, is like, it's not even really a 2020 game, but I'm just like, please be a 2020 game.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Alrighty.
You guys.
For the third year in a row.
I literally just pulled up my 2017. It's right here.
For the third year in a row, my most anticipated game of 2020, which I have faith
which is
will
actually come out in
2020
2020 now.
is Last of Us 2.
Oh, hell yeah.
So, Last of Us, the first one, is one of my all-time favorite games, which came out in 2013, correct? I believe it was.
I believe. Let me fact check that so we don't get roasted.
They've took their fucking time with, but it looks so great.
But this is how delayed it's been. The fact is in 2017 when we put it on the list, it was presumed to come out in 2018. Yeah. Here we are at the start of 2020, and it's still not released, which is good from the aspect that they didn't feel the game was good enough to come out at that time, but the expectations are at an all-time high.
Pretty much.
Like, I spent the past
it came out June 14th, 2013.
Yeah, which I've had the past month or two where I've been recapping everything with the first Last of Us, catching up with all the news for Last of Us 2. But one thing I just want to point out before I get into that, it came out on the PS3. The PS4 we got a remastering of
Jesus,
it. It's
a
PS3 game.
Yes.
Wow.
But anyway, what I want to talk about was Last of Us 2, because Troy Baker and Nolan North have their own YouTube channels. It's fucking awesome. Where they basically give the behind the scenes for gaming stuff and all that kind of thing. Which the first Last of Us is essentially one of Troy Baker's kids. It's his most prized possession as being a part of that game. But he's talked about it. Apparently, they've been working on it so long and so hard. They essentially had a game when we were talking about it. Then the director, Neil, I'm blanking on his last name right now, came in essentially and was like, I got a better idea for the game. And they essentially remade Last of Us 2. Which is another reason it's taken so long.
Probably just from like the ground up.
Yeah, to where they're constantly cutting things, redesigning things, retooling things.
So imagine if we got the game that they were going to release now, and then we also got a copy of what they were going to release at that time.
They could have made at least 2 or 3 games in that time. And it seems like they have made 2 or 3 games in that time.
But they're just
not
combining
it into one.
Release the Troy Baker cut.
Right? Well, like, one of the cool things, a little bit of an anecdote, with the first game, is they have an alternate ending. Which is it's such a wholesome, hilarious thing. And it wasn't fully rendered out. But they were recording the final scene of Last of Us. And apparently Troy was having some trouble with some of the blocking things, like he had to pick up a gun in a certain cutscene. He kept dropping the gun or something like that. So the director went up to one of the supporting actors who played Marlene and said, hey, could you do whisper, whisper, whisper in this last take of it? He went to Troy and was like, hey, we got to do one more take because I'm not happy with it. Just amp up the energy. And no matter what, just roll with it. No matter what happens, keep going with it. So we drop the gun, whatever. What he told the other actress is to make all of her lines a musical and sing them. And it's the scene where it's Marlene saying, like, let her die, she'll be raped and murdered in the real world and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's like some Frozen stuff.
And Troy Baker, that motherfucker, catches on immediately and sings the rest of his line. And dances them ballet style.
Fantastic.
Let her die.
The perfect pick-me-up. And it's incredible. But that's a minor anecdote. They've been working on this game for so long. The gameplay and the trailers look phenomenal.
But again, like, they have to nail this right on the head.
Yeah.
Or else people are going to literally go to their offices and start rioting.
It's like they're actually making the Half-Life 3. Valve doesn't have the rights to
people are literally going to be playing it outside of their offices, so that way if they don't like it, they can just straight up go there.
And if they do like it, they're going to be throwing roses and applauding for the next year.
So we could be either having the post Last of Us 2 riots of 2020 or the post Last of Us parade of 2020.
Which, yeah, and I think it's an interesting direction they're taking with it, but I'm just so excited to see the execution of it.
So if this game doesn't release this year, it's not going on next year's anticipated list. We have an actual release date for once, which is a lot more than we've ever had.
They have pushed it back. It was February, and I think now it's May.
It's May, but we have.
So hopefully they don't do that again.
But before we were given like a month and a year.
Yeah.
Now we have a day.
Yes.
And you can actually place your pre-order and everything else.
Yes.
So I think it's okay. We'll see though.
Oh, you can place a pre-order now?
Yes.
Well, then I hope that's good enough seal of approval to say that.
Because that would be kind of screwy if they delayed it. Then they have to refund all of those pre-orders.
Yeah, and I think that
pretty much.
the director, I have faith that he has a high enough quality standard to where he knows Last of Us, and I'm just excited. Like the gameplay trailer looks badass in some of what it lets you do. In the character stuff, I'm excited to explore Ellie as a character more, especially an older Ellie. Joel, they've been really keeping under wraps, which I'm curious about. Because there's definitely something with Joel that we don't know at this moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that ending kind of definitely insinuated there's something going on.
Yeah, well, even in the trailer, and all the things, like, they show what's essentially the beginning-ish of the game. Joel's not around. Then there's kind of the midpoint, and you hear, like, some kind of voiceover of Ellie's in Seattle, I think it is, kind of stealthing around. You hear these two guys talking about, like, oh my god, there's a man who's just taking out people here. We gotta be on high alert, and little things like that. And then the trailer ends with Ellie kind of around a corner as a weaponized truck is coming by, and hands grabbing her mouth and shoulders pulling her back, and her turning around, seeing the person be like, what are you doing here? And it's Joel, a much older Joel, saying, you didn't think I was going to let you do this all by yourself. And I'm just so... like, that's the only frame we've seen of Joel. And I'm like, what the fuck has happened since that time that he's been away from Ellie? Because even in the trailer, Tommy's essentially her surrogate father in the camp. And, like, I don't know. I'm just so curious because there's some twist we don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
For the third year in a row.
Yep, third year in a
Last
row.
of Us Part 2 is on.
Most anticipated game
of 2020.
It has been my number one for 3 years in a row.
So in 2017, or in the 2017 rewind, it was my number 3 most anticipated, and then 2018 rewind, it went back. It was my, it's been first ever since then.
Yeah.
That just made me realize something. Have I been mentioning Metroid Prime at the anticipated list?
You said it last year for sure. I don't know about the year before that.
Damn.
But last year for sure.
Okay, now I'm starting to feel like you guys are feeling shit.
Yeah.
Alright. Been waiting that long.
Alright. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a brief intermission, and we'll be right back with movies.
The best section.
Yep. So it will be from movies, worst movies, wish list movies, best movies, and anticipated movies. So we will see you guys then. Be back in a bit.